The ceasefire expires in 4 days. The Strait of Hormuz is hanging by a thread. Iran still has thousands of missiles pointed at US bases. And Trump just told the whole country. Watch what happens in the next week or so. If you're not paying attention to what's going on in the Middle East right now, I need you to stop everything you're doing and watch this video. Because what happens in the next 96 hours could directly hit your wallet, your gas tank, your grocery bill, your retirement account, and honestly, the entire direction of America for the next decade. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying that because the numbers don't lie. And I'm about to show you every single one of them. Let's go. Alright, so let me catch you up fast. Because if you haven't been following this, you've been missing one of the most explosive geopolitical situations since World War II. I'm dead serious. On February 28, 2026, just 48 days ago, the United States and Israel launched a massive, coordinated surprise military strike on Iran. They called it Operation Epic Fury. And in the opening salvo, within literally half a minute, they hit 3 separate locations simultaneously and killed Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. Gone. The man who ran Iran for decades, dead. Iran fired back hard. Hundreds of ballistic missiles, thousands of attack drones, hitting US bases in Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the UAE. They hit a British base in Cyprus. Missiles were shot down over Turkey. Iran even shut down the Strait of Hormuz, the single most important oil choke point on the entire planet, cutting off 20% of the world's oil supply in one move. And here's what nobody's talking about loud enough. Iran still has, right now today, as of this morning, thousands of missiles and one-way attack drones that survived all those US and Israeli airstrikes. The Defense Intelligence Agency confirmed that to Congress just yesterday. Half of Iran's missile launchers are still intact. This thing is nowhere near done. So where are we right now? Today is April 17th, 2026, day 48 of this war. Here's the situation as of this morning. And I pulled this from CNN, Al Jazeera, CBS, and Britannica, so this is confirmed multi-source information. Number 1, there is a ceasefire, but it expires on April 21st. That's 4 days from right now, 4 days. Pakistan brokered a 2-week ceasefire starting April 8th. Trump announced it, Iran confirmed it. Markets immediately rallied. The S&P 500 shot to a record high of 7,023. The Nasdaq hit 24,000. Oil dropped below $100 a barrel. Everyone exhaled. But here's the thing. The peace talks in Islamabad on April 11th and 12th lasted 21 hours and collapsed. No deal. J.D. Vance flew all the way to Pakistan, sat across from Iranian officials, and walked out empty-handed. The 2 biggest sticking points. Iran's nuclear program. The US wants Iran to completely give up enrichment for 20 years. Iran countered with 5 years and both sides walked away. And the Strait of Hormuz. Iran wants international recognition of its sovereignty over the strait. The US called that completely unacceptable. So right now we've got a fragile ceasefire. Vance himself called it a fragile truce. That expires in 4 days, with no deal on the table, both sides dug in, and Trump hinting at military options if Iran doesn't come around. Number 2, Iran just opened the Strait of Hormuz, but only temporarily. This morning, Iran's foreign minister announced the strait is open for commercial vessels, quote, for the remaining period of the ceasefire, meaning the moment that ceasefire ends on April 21st, the strait could close again. And when I say that matters, let me hit you with what that actually means in real money terms in a second. Number 3, Lebanon just got a ceasefire too. 10 days. Trump announced it last night. Hezbollah agreed to pause. Fireworks went off in Beirut. But Israeli troops are still in southern Lebanon, Hezbollah is still armed, and Iran is furious that Lebanon wasn't included in the original US-Iran ceasefire agreement. Number 4, Trump told a crowd in Las Vegas last night, watch what happens over the next week or so, you could be very impressed. He said the war is very close to over, and then added, if things go well, vote Republican in the midterms. Now look, Trump says a lot of things. But when the President of the United States tells a crowd to watch what happens in the next week, right before a ceasefire deadline, that's either a deal coming or it's a green light for strikes resuming. There's almost no middle ground here. Now let's talk about what this means for your money. Because this is where most people completely zone out, and they shouldn't. This directly affects every single American household. When Iran shut down the Strait of Hormuz back in late February, Oil prices went from $67 a barrel to over $110 in a matter of days. That's what the IEA called, quote, the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Never happened before at this scale. Not in the 70s oil crisis. Not in Gulf War I. Not in Gulf War II. Never. US crude right now is sitting around $95 a barrel, down from those highs, but still 42% above where it was before the war. Gas in Las Vegas, where Trump was speaking last night, is around $5 a gallon. California already hit 5+. Goldman Sachs put out a note saying if the Strait closes again and stays closed for weeks, US gasoline will hit $3.50 nationally and inflation becomes a permanent problem. JP Morgan's global research team put it in writing. If Brent crude stays elevated through mid-year, global GDP growth gets shaved by 0.6% annualized. That sounds small. It's not small. When you factor in that we're already dealing with tariff inflation, a slowing labor market, and a Fed that's completely frozen, let me talk about the Fed for a second because this is massive. Before this war started, everybody was expecting rate cuts in 2026. The market was pricing in multiple cuts. But Goldman's economists, Jessica Rendels and David Mericle, said the oil price spike and the war uncertainty have kept the Fed stuck in wait-and-see mode. Current market pricing doesn't see a rate cut until mid-2027. That means mortgage rates stay elevated. That means the housing market stays frozen. That means if you were waiting to refinance or buy a house, you're waiting even longer. And here's something that almost nobody in mainstream media is covering. The University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Survey just hit its lowest level since the 1950s. I want you to really absorb that. Lower than during the Vietnam War. Lower than 9/11. Lower than the 2008 financial crisis. Lower than COVID. The American consumer is more scared right now than they've been in 70 years of recorded data. But here's the other side. And I want to be balanced here because this is important. The S&P 500 just hit a record high. The Nasdaq has had 11 consecutive days of gains. Stocks are up. And David Kelly, chief global strategist at JP Morgan Asset Management, said, consumer sentiment has never been a reliable predictor of actual spending behavior. People can say they're scared and still keep spending. He's projecting real consumer spending to grow 0.8% this year. So we've got a market that's pricing in peace, while the reality on the ground is that we've got a 4-day ceasefire window, no deal, an Iranian government that says it won't extend the ceasefire, and thousands of missiles still pointed at US bases. Morgan Stanley put it best, quote, the key risk is duration. If this war drags on, all bets are off. If a deal gets done in the next 4 days, markets rip higher and oil crashes back towards 70. That's the bet the market is making right now. And you need to decide which side of that bet you want to be on. Let me tell you what the experts are actually saying about what comes next. And I want to give you 3 scenarios, because that's the honest way to look at this. Scenario 1, the deal scenario. Trump gets his win before the midterms. Look, Trump has been telegraphing this hard. He said in Las Vegas, watch what happens in the next week or so. The White House has confirmed they're open to a second round of talks in Islamabad before April 21st. Trump proposed a 20-year suspension of Iranian uranium enrichment. Iran countered with 5 years. The gap is 15 years. That's not an impossible bridge to cross. Pakistan's Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif, is literally doing a full Middle East tour right now. Qatar, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, trying to build momentum for a second round of talks. Pakistan's army chief was in Tehran meeting with Iranian officials this week. Iran expert Trita Parsi said, the terrain has shifted. Trump's use of force, while significant, didn't achieve the total collapse of the Iranian regime. Iran is still standing. That actually gives both sides a face-saving way to negotiate. If a deal gets done, oil goes back towards 70, gas prices fall, inflation cools, the Fed cuts rates, the housing market opens back up, stock market surges even higher. Trump claims a massive geopolitical win going into the midterms. That's the bull case. Scenario 2. Ceasefire collapses, war resumes. Iran's advisor Mohsen Rezaieh warned, if the US continues its naval blockade of Iranian ports, Iran will start targeting US ships in the Red Sea. The IRGC said US military vessels approaching the Strait of Hormuz will be considered a ceasefire violation. Iran's deputy foreign minister already said Tehran is rejecting any temporary ceasefire, They want a comprehensive, permanent end to the war. But the US is blockading their ports. New oil sanctions just dropped yesterday. Treasury sanctioned 24 individuals and companies tied to Iranian oil networks. If talks fail, if the ceasefire expires April 21st without a deal, and if US bombing resumes, Strait of Hormuz closes again. Oil spikes back above 110, maybe higher. Goldman's $125 threshold, where it becomes a genuine economic emergency, becomes very real. Defense. Stocks explode higher. Energy stocks surge. But the broader economy, consumers, the housing market, it gets really ugly. The New York Fed's Global Supply Chain Pressure Index in March hit its highest level since January 2023. That's before the full supply chain impact from the Strait closure even hits the US economy, which Morgan Stanley warns will be felt more in the coming months as raw material flows tighten. And here's the kicker that nobody's talking about. Iran's nuclear status is now completely unknown. The IAEA can't verify what Iran has. Iran denied inspectors access to bombed nuclear facilities. Reports emerged of highly enriched uranium stored in underground facilities that US bombs couldn't reach. If the war resumes and Iran decides it has nothing to lose, the nuclear calculus changes completely. Scenario 3, the limbo scenario. And honestly, this might be the most dangerous one. The ceasefire gets extended. Talks drag on for weeks. Neither side fully commits. The Strait of Hormuz stays partially restricted. Oil stays elevated, not spiking, but not dropping. Inflation stays sticky. The Fed stays frozen. Markets stagnate. And the US economy slowly bleeds from 1,000 cuts. This is stagflation territory. High inflation, low growth, frozen Fed. The 1970s playbook, and if you lived through the 70s or you've studied it, you know how brutal that was for regular Americans. Now let me talk about the bigger picture that nobody's connecting right now. This war isn't just about Iran and nukes. This is about the entire architecture of the Middle East getting rebuilt in real time. Iran's supreme leader Khamenei, killed. Ali Larijani, killed. IRGC intelligence chief, killed. Iran has a new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, who is reportedly more hawkish and more repressive than his father. Trump himself said that appointment was unacceptable. The son of the man we killed is now running Iran. Let that sink in. Hezbollah has been significantly weakened. Over 2,000 people killed in Lebanon, civilians and fighters. The Lebanese government just agreed to a ceasefire with Israel, but Hezbollah hasn't formally agreed to anything. They announced a pause in attacks. A pause. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, they reportedly pushed Trump to continue the war until there are significant changes in Iran's leadership. These are US allies calling for regime change. That's a massive signal. China is playing an interesting game. China's foreign minister told Iran they support maintaining the momentum of ceasefire and peace talks. China also helped broker the ceasefire alongside Pakistan. But China declined Trump's request for military support to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. China is protecting its interests. They don't want war, they need Iranian oil, but they're not helping America win. Russia welcomed the ceasefire and expressed hope that the US would now return to focusing on a Russia-Ukraine deal. Classic Russia, using every crisis to extract concessions. And then there's Pakistan. This is fascinating. Pakistan has emerged as the most important intermediary in the most consequential conflict of the 21st century. Pakistan's army chief flew into Tehran this week. Pakistan's prime minister is on a Middle East tour. The talks are happening in Islamabad. A country that's been stuck in its own economic crisis is suddenly playing a critical role in world history. That matters for the region. It matters a lot. So what do you actually do with all of this information? If you're an investor, and I'm not a financial advisor, so talk to yours, but the playbook that Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan are laying out is pretty clear. Defense and aerospace is a multi-year story, regardless of how this ends. Energy remains volatile with asymmetric upside if the war resumes. If you're in rate-sensitive positions, real estate, long-duration bonds, the duration risk from a prolonged war is real. If you're a regular American trying to figure out your budget, the next 4 days matter. If a deal gets announced before April 21st, gas prices will start falling within weeks. If talks collapse and war resumes, you should expect gas above $5 nationally. That's not fear-mongering, that's what Goldman Sachs put in writing. If you're watching the midterms, and Trump is very clearly tying this war to November 2026, watch the gas pump. Historically, the sitting president's party loses seats in midterms, but a peace deal right now, especially one that brings oil prices down, could change that math significantly. Trump knows it. That's why he's pushing so hard. Here's the bottom line. Here's what this all comes down to. We are in a 4-day window right now. Today is April 17th. The ceasefire expires April 21st, where one of 3 things is going to happen. A deal gets made and the world exhales. The war resumes and the economic pain gets much worse. Or we get stuck in a dangerous, expensive limbo that bleeds the American economy dry. Trump is signaling a deal. Markets are pricing in a deal. But Iran hasn't moved enough on the 2 biggest issues, nukes and the Strait. And the guys with the missiles, they're still pointing at US bases. Half of Iran's missile launchers are still intact. Their new supreme leader is reportedly more hawkish than the last one. The ceasefire is fragile. J.D. Vance's own words, not mine, his. So watch the next 4 days very carefully. Watch for a second round of talks announcement in Islamabad. Watch whether Trump extends the ceasefire or resumes the blockade with more force. Watch oil prices. If Brent crude starts creeping back toward 100, the market is losing confidence in a deal. If it drops toward 85, a deal might be imminent. This is history happening in real time. And unlike most things in the news that feel distant and abstract, this one hits your gas tank, your grocery bill, your mortgage rate, and your retirement account directly. Stay informed, stay sharp, and if you got value from this breakdown, you know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because I'm going to be covering this every single day as it develops. The next update could be the most important one yet. We'll see you then.